Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for this UN Behavioral Science Week session on an introduction to artificial intelligence in behavioral science. My name is Mary McLennan. I am the Senior Advisor in Behavioral Science to the Executive Office of the Secretary General. I also lead an initiative called the UN Behavioral Science Group, which I will come to shortly, and is actually organizing Behavioral Science Week this year. So speaking of the week, we're bringing together 46 entities across, this is our third day of 5 days and over 60 speakers. So there's lots to check out. Today we have a session on AI and behavioral science. We also have one after this on data and behavioral science. One tomorrow on advanced methods and thinking about different ways of reflecting behavioral science in different different methods. And we also have a few case studies, sessions, expos on Thursday and Friday. So lots more to check out. And I'll put the links in the chat for you shortly. But just a bit more about the Behavioral Science Group before we get started. So the Behavioral Science Group brings together over 7,000 members from more than 70 entities and 150 countries. There's lots of interest and demand when it comes to behavioral science across the UN. You'll hear about some of the experiences that colleagues have had with behavioral science throughout the week over the next few days. Just to kind of situate ourselves in some of the bigger picture pieces of work when it comes to behavioral science across the UN. So behavioral science is part of this UN 2.0 quintet of change agenda, and we'll revisit this a little bit later. But essentially, this is an agenda put forward by the Secretary General. These are 5 areas that he has deemed important for the UN to be nimble and effective and really deliver on his ambitious agenda. So they are behavioral science alongside data, digital transformation, innovation, and strategic foresight. So you can see some of the intersections that we might explore in our discussion today. So with that, there's lots to understand about behavioral science across the UN. We've been doing this for a number of years now. We have a number of publications, including the Secretary General's guidance note on behavioral science, as well as the UN Behavioral Science Review, which features case studies of behavioral science applications from across the UN. You can also join the Behavioral Science Group as well. So if you are in the UN, you're very welcome to do so. If you're outside the UN, you can join as an observer and be invited to our discussions and hear about different updates and things that are going on across the UN. Okay, so with that, in today's session, we'll have a panel discussion and a number of speakers. And we ask throughout this discussion that you put your questions in the Q&A box. You'll see it at the bottom of your screen. You can also upvote the questions of your colleagues if you don't have one yourself. So we encourage you to check it out and just kind of see where the discussion's going, and hopefully we can orient ourselves in a direction that's really useful for the people joining us today. Okay, so with that, on to our speakers for today. So we're very fortunate to start off with some opening remarks from Professor Anna Korhonen from the University of Cambridge, where she's a professor of natural language processing and also the co-director of the Language and Technology Lab. And importantly for our discussion today, she's the director of the Center for Human-Inspired Artificial Intelligence. So you can imagine a lot of her work intersects with our area of behavioral science and some interesting ways we can unpack together today. She's very interested in the human-centric applications of natural language processing and draws from understandings of cognitive, social, as well as creative intelligence as a focus on looking at questions that are oriented towards social and global good. So she has over 180 peer-reviewed publications in this space. So she's very well placed to be with us today. She's been looking at these topics for many years, and we're very fortunate to have her. So after Professor Korhonen, we'll hear from Michel Dugas from the World Bank and Shambhavi Mohan from UNICC to share some examples from the UN. And then over to Fiona Ceci and Julia Shondice from the UN Data and Digital Communities, who will speak to their experiences and understanding of behavioral science across those areas. So I am going to stop screen sharing now and turn it over to Professor Korhonen. Over to you. I'll share your slides.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary, and good day, everyone. I'm truly delighted to be opening this session on AI and behavioral sciences, and I'm especially excited about this topic because the relationship between these fields is now more important and timely than ever before. Mary, I can't see the slides actually. Are you sharing them? There we go. Okay, you can move to the next slide. Thank you. So Mary, if you can hear me, perhaps you could move to the next slide.
Oh, apologies. Let me just try sharing again. Can you see that?
Yeah, maybe the previous slide, yeah.
This one?
That's one, yeah. Thank you so much.
This one, got it. Okay.
Yeah, okay. So let's start with behavioral sciences. So as we are hearing over the course of the week, these really cover a range of fields, including economics, psychology, sociology, anthropology, law, and more. What really connects these sciences is that shared goal in terms of trying to understand how people behave, how they take decisions, and how they respond to the world around them. That insight can be incredibly valuable for the UN's work. It can help us design smarter policies and interventions and can also make them more effective, fair, and efficient. Now, artificial intelligence then can also transform how we address the global challenges. While this technology has actually been around for decades, it's only like the recent advances that have brought it into the real kind of everyday life and also to the real world decision making. We can see that some of the AI systems are already being used to support the Sustainable Development Goals, from climate forecasting to healthcare to expanding access to education and so forth. So when we look at these, we look at behavioral sciences and AI, we can see that they are both powerful on their own, and they are both essential for delivering on the UN's mission. But today, and Mary, you can go to the next slide now, we are really asking what happens when they work together. Could they help and shape or even supercharge each other to drive even greater impact? Next slide, please. So let's start by looking at how AI can support behavioral sciences. First, AI can offer a really powerful research tool. So it can help us analyze large, complex human data really quickly, spotting patterns that would be really hard or even impossible to find by hand or through the traditional search means. This can speed up discovery in many areas, like public health, development, economics, and more. The recent Nobel Prizes actually in other areas of science, like biology and chemistry, have shown that AI isn't just a tech breakthrough, it's actually changing how science is done. So it's a new research tool. The second benefit is that AI can really help us put behavioral sciences into practice. So we can use it to build smarter tools that can actually adapt to how people think and act, like personalized help messages, customized learning tools, and even better digital services. So AI can really help and amplify behavioral sciences, both in research and in real-world impact across the SDGs. So the next slide, please, Mary. Now let's reverse the lens completely and ask now, how could behavioral sciences help and shape AI? I would argue, or go as far as argue, that if AI is to truly serve humanity, it has to be informed by behavioral sciences. We have all seen the limits of current AI systems. They often miss the human context completely. They struggle to understand our cultures, motivations, emotions, and social norms. And it is really this problem that leads to systems that may seem technically very strong, but are actually socially misaligned. And this is exactly where behavioral science can help. So it can offer that deep insight into how people actually think, feel, and interact. And that's exactly what AI needs to become more human aware. Technically, this means grounding AI in context, not only in the data. And practically, it means designing systems that are more trusted, usable, and appropriate. What AI researchers often describe as kind of lack of common sense in these systems is really a lack of understanding of people, and behavioral science can help and close that gap. So this is already a growing area of research within the AI community, and we have had some really exciting emerging results. But to make real progress, we need much closer collaboration with behavioral science experts. This becomes particularly important when AI is used in communities where values, norms, and social structures are very different from those that the technology was trained on. In other words, the technology was maybe trained in the global north, but when we applied in the global south, many of the assumptions don't hold anymore. So without this kind of human grounding, AI can still work in many simple and low risk settings, but it will often fall short in high stakes areas like decision making, policy, and justice, especially when we bring them into socially complex contexts. Next slide, please. So AI and behavioral science are powerful on their own, but they can be really transformational together. They can help us understand how people think and act, and they can help us build technologies that really work for people and in the real world, not just in a lab or as pilot projects. So what do we need to really make this into work? We need several things. So first, we need that collaboration across disciplines. That goes without saying. Not only AI experts collaborating with behavioral science experts, but we should also involve those people or experts in the areas where we are working to produce applications in. For example, it could be health, education, climate, or another field. Second, we also need to work across sectors. That means including the people who actually use the technology, and also those who deliver or regulate it, like public services, governments, businesses, or NGOs, depending on the context that we have. Everybody brings in something important, and ideally we want to hear all these voices from the start before we start to develop the technology. The third thing we need is to test these technologies in real context, because if we don't really know what works, what doesn't, and how people really interact with these systems. So it's really important. And finally, we need good oversight. So human AI collaboration can be powerful, but only if the human side is well understood and supported. And responsible research and development should really be the foundation of everything we do in this space. And the final slide, Mary, please. So to sum up, these interdisciplinary and cross-sectoral collaborations can really supercharge our efforts towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. We should not treat them as separate tools, but as partners in shaping solutions for people and the planet. And today's session is an opportunity to explore what some of these partnerships can look like in practice. And I'm really excited to hear about the examples and also seeing the discussions and the collaborations that may emerge from today. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much for those remarks. Really helps us set us up in terms of how we can work better together, how we can work across the UN with academics, across academic disciplines, also how we can create meaningful partnerships in this new and evolving space as you've so rightfully defined for us. And yeah, the importance of testing that really aligns very well with how we think about behavioral science in the UN and all of the experiments and understanding what works. So there's lots there to unpack, and lots of claps and hearts from the audience. I don't know if you can see that. Okay, well, thank you very much for those remarks. Now we'll turn it over to our panel from the UN to share some of their remarks. But Professor Korhonen will be around for the Q&A. So if you have questions for her, I will get to those near the end of our discussion. Okay, so with that, over to Michelle from the World Bank to share your case study example.
Thank you, Mary. One moment as I set up my share screen here. Thank you. I think that was a great introduction to this topic. And I'm very excited to be here today for this session where I'll explore how we're integrating AI with behavioral science at the World Bank to address complex policy challenges. And in this presentation, I'll touch on some concrete applications where we are exploring how to capitalize on the complementarities of AI and behavioral science that Professor Korhonen nicely introduced in the introductory talk, while also highlighting some of our team's work examining some key limitations and necessary cautions in applying AI, particularly in the kinds of low resource settings where we work. So first, just a little bit about Embed. We're a development-focused and applied behavioral science unit at the World Bank, meaning we work with other World Bank teams, governments, and partners to try and improve the effectiveness of policy by incorporating behavioral insights that might otherwise be overlooked in policy design. And we're housed within the World Bank's Development Impact Department. You might have actually seen our director participating in the opening session for this week's activities. And like, many behavioral science units, we have a general approach that we adopt to guide our application of behavioral science to policy challenges, starting with, defining problems, diagnosing barriers, designing and evaluating solutions, and scaling what works. And of course, you can imagine that, there are many places throughout this cycle where there's ample opportunity to apply AI to ultimately, make our application of behavioral insights more impactful. And now I'll highlight a few key areas where we're starting to work in this direction and apply AI throughout our projects. So when it comes to defining problems in diagnostics, we're leveraging AI to support diagnostic design and capacity building, and also exploring use of AI for data-driven segmentation and persona development. And just to, more concretely show one example of this, for behavioral diagnostics, the team is developing a Socratic tutor to complement online courses on how to implement behavioral diagnostics. So, we found that while, our team and many other teams have developed toolkits and other resources to help practitioners in applying a behavioral science lens to their policy problems, we find that translation of these materials, which tend to be in PDF form, to practice really remains a challenge for many of our partners and practitioners. So there's strong demand for more interactive, tailored support throughout the process, and as such, the aim of this tool is to use a gamified experience to help users remain engaged in learning about behavioral diagnostics and leverage AI-driven dialogue and questioning to foster deeper understanding of the material. And in this sense, the tool kind of incorporates both behavioral science elements and AI for better capacity building and hopefully more impact on helping practitioners apply behavioral diagnostics in their own work. And when it comes to designing solutions and implementing and evaluating solutions, I think this is where, for many people, some of the most interesting opportunities for applying AI lie. So here are some of our teams developing behavioral solutions that leverage AI to be more interactive and engaging, as well as more personalized and targeted. Recognizing that one size doesn't fit all, and one of the strengths of AI is the ability to personalize interventions on a much more scalable fashion. And to show a concrete example of how our team is doing this, I'll quickly highlight one example that our team is working on, focusing on a project exploring whether an AI-powered career coaching chatbot can increase female labor force participation in Morocco. So just as a bit of context, in Morocco, labor force participation has dropped over 10 percentage points over the last 2 decades, despite more women than men now enrolling in tertiary education. So educated women in Morocco still face a disproportionately high unemployment, sometimes up to 50%, highlighting this major disconnect between education and the labor market, often driven by traditional gender norms, and especially the norm that a husband should be the breadwinner of a family. So to tackle these barriers, we're developing a gender-sensitive AI-powered career coach using a WhatsApp-based chatbot to help women transition more successfully into the workforce. So in what ways is this tool aiming to be gender sensitive? Well, the chatbot will deliver gender and norm sensitive advice, like how to handle biased interview questions, how to talk to parents about these issues. The tool also integrate insights about job search strategies, workplace expectations, and stories of other female role models to foster behavior change. And lastly, the chatbot itself will be kind of a data collection tool to gather data-driven insights to better understand job search barriers and inform future policy. And to build this gender-sensitive chatbot, the team's curating a behavioral science knowledge base that the LLM or large language model will query when responding to user inputs to better tailor chatbot responses to these kind of gender-sensitive principles, as depicted in this somewhat simplified figure. And this is kind of what it will look like in WhatsApp as the team is kind of refining user design, but the idea is that will be delivered in a very accessible platform, and WhatsApp is widely used in the country context. So stay tuned on results with that as the team is refining design. I know I very quickly covered some of the promising ways in which our team is integrating AI and BI to shape policy. And I quickly wanted to touch on a project that some of my colleagues are leading to assess and address some of the limitations of off-the-shelf AI products, especially in settings beyond the US and the English-speaking world. So in particular, our team is exploring the extent to which large language model outputs might reflect systematic gender bias and whether potential bias is exacerbated in low resource languages. And why might large language models reflect systematic gender bias? Because they're based on data that humans generated. And we also know that humans tend to be biased themselves. So for example, humans associate giftedness with gender on different topics. You can see, for giftedness associated with math and science, it tends to be thought of as a male characteristics. And this figure depicts data showing that Americans, Indians, and Nigerians have similar associations on that. And likewise, on the other hand, these these samples associate giftedness in the humanities and linguistics with females, so showcasing some gender stereotyping. So our colleagues looked at whether ChatGPT in this context would reflect similar systematic biases about giftedness on these issues, prompting ChatGPT in different languages hundreds of times to see if the probability of assigning easier or difficult tasks to either a male or female student might differ according to these characteristics. And what our colleagues found was that in Hindi, Hindi prompted ChatGPT, or GPT, systematically assigned more difficult questions on all topics to the hypothetical male student, suggesting an association of giftedness with males. Whereas in contrast, the English ChatGPT or prompted GPT did the opposite. So the English version GPT associated giftedness on all topics with female students. So just to highlight that these findings show the importance of trying to understand what biases might be embedded in any AI models that we might be applying before applying them broadly in the field. So as next steps on this project, our colleagues are planning to explore whether fine-tuning the models can reduce the likelihood of these biases and make them better suited for use cases in the field. So I'll stop there, and with thanks to all my colleagues who are contributing to these varied projects.
Great, thank you, Michelle. There's a lot. So I don't know if you can see all the reactions there, but people are definitely curious to hear more about your work in the future. So we can put the embed website in the chat, and maybe we will definitely share when you have more results with the group. So I'll also put in the chat here. I mentioned earlier the UN Behavioral Science group. So here are some links to join the group and join Behavioral Science Week and all of that. So, okay, with that, over to our next speaker from the UN, Shimpavi, over to you.
Thank you, Mary. I think both the presentations were so lovely, especially with Anna introducing details on like how we need to include experts when we are doing any kind of behavioral science work, as well as with like we also being introduced by World Bank on exactly the impact of evaluation and testing the limits of the chatbot. And that's the topic that I will be focusing on. So I think some of you guys might have seen a version of this particular presentation. And here I'll mainly focus on testing and evaluation aspect of it. But I still want to start off with a little bit on how this project started and how we eventually ended up starting off with it. So this project was originally started as a chatbot POC created by UNHCR a couple of years ago. And last year, we started with implementing and expanding this project across 13 UN agencies so that they can come together, collaborate, and create a HR chatbot where you can ask questions associated with your own agency, as well as you can compare policies across agencies. So here, as you can see in this particular GIF, you can choose between the two approaches where you want to filter and ask a question related to a particular agency, as well as you can compare across different agencies and identify the differences between the policies. You can also see that here, once you ask the question, it not only gives you the response, it actually tells you where you're getting the response from. And one of the key features in this particular project was to ensure that once we are doing this evaluation, we are able to get correct response, because here you cannot have a choice of any misrepresentation of the HR policies associated. So these were the few business values that we worked with. First was ensuring that it answers the HR policy questions. We are also able to benchmark across different UN agency policies. And sorry, this I need to minimize. Yeah, we are able to draft emails directly. We are able to summarize and as well as do FAQs. And not only that, this particular chatbot can respond in all the UN languages as well. So I think like the point on ensuring that there's no bias is very important. So now, at this point, assume that we have built the chatbot. We launched it last year in October, and now we are focusing on evaluation aspect. So there are a few factors we need to remember. This is a chatbot for UNHR policies, which we have to ensure that it is answering only on the UN HR policies and no other HR policies across the world. So as we can see, we had to do multiple rounds of iterations, where the round one, we ensured that we are establishing a baseline and then understanding what kind of problems we are facing, as well as in the next round, we tried fixing many of them, and including like changing the GPT model, adding new prompts, and then again in the round 3, once we had a slightly improved version, we had to retest again so that we are able to get rid of all the problems. Now let's look at what all problems did we face. First was the UN terminology understanding. And since a lot of people in this talk are from UN, you know there's a lot of terminologies associated. For example, a staff before I joined UN, a staff meant any employee of UN. But now I know that there's a G staff, P staff, fixed term, temporary, so on. This is something the chatbot didn't understand. So we had to ensure and prompt engineer so that it's able to understand that. As well as across organizations, there are terminology differences on how they conduct things. So we also had to ensure that it is able to understand across every single agency. Another thing we saw was it's not giving a complete response. And in this, you had to do prompt engineering, and finally the user query search. This is something we had to focus a lot on. For example, if you ask a question like, will I get a maternity leave? The like policy, right? Like, so in this particular case, the chatbot will just respond as yes, you will get, and give you some associated benefits associated with maternity leave. But if you want to get a full complete response, you have to ask, what are the benefits associated with maternity policy leave? So in that case, it will give you a full-fledged response. Lastly, I think I didn't mention earlier, we worked very closely with UN HR policy officers, and this was super important because they are the experts in the field. They know all the questions, they know the responses to them. So when we were conducting any iteration, the improvement testing was conducted by them. Now I want to focus on a little bit on what all we did. And here, as you can see on the right side, how across the iteration, the averages changed. Like in round 1, we had 55% correctness level. And in the final round, we had around 82% correctness level. And this is across 13 agencies. So for some of them, we had around 75, but for others, we had up to 90% correctness. So as we can see, the initial evaluations indicated suboptimal correctness. So at this point, we agreed across all our 13 partners what our go live criteria should be, which in this case was we have to get at least 70% to even go live with the solution. At this point, we analyzed the causes of all the issues and provided interventions. So at this point, we trained the users on what to do and what not to do. We also ensured that we are working on improving the response structure and relevance, as well as we identified what all terminology comprehensions and challenges it faces, and conducted multiple rounds of experiments. So we would change few wordings and see how the prompt responds, like the chatbot response. Then we would change some other things and then see again how it's responding. And at the end of the day, we ensured that the policy officers are included at every step of the way. We actually conducted group sessions as well to get together and understand like what are the differences in the policy documents, what are the key terminologies that has to be included in the chatbot. And finally, we also included the tech partner Microsoft to ensure and validate like we are crossing our T's and dotting our I's. And we also compared with Copilot or like agentic AIs, like, like how it's performing against those as well. So this was the iteration of evaluation. And finally, once we launched, we wanted to ensure that there's a good governance in place, where we had 2 separate bodies of governance, since we are working across multiple UN agencies, to ensure that we are smooth operations conducted. As well as now we are also onboarding 4 to 5 new agencies to the solution. So we wanted to create that there's a multiple artifacts available already to be shared, which includes like a video recording of how to use the chatbot, as well as a user manual as well. And lastly, before launching, we did a lot of jailbreak testing. So what is jailbreaking? This is a very key integral part of a LLM, large language model based chatbot that you create. So we created 10 different ways of figuring out whether the chatbot will create any errors. Some of them was instruction override. Like I ask the chatbot, ignore all the previous instructions and now answer these questions. Is the chatbot ignoring the original prompt being set by the engineer? Or I ask it to like provide some misinformation, or like multiple ways of asking an ethical dilemma question. But we wanted to ensure that the chatbot is only responding from the HR policy documents. And this was why we did the jailbreak testing. And finally, now we are expanding it to new agencies as well as doing some more enhancements to the solution. And that this is where we are. So just to highlight, we started off with 13 agencies to ensure that we are able to benchmark as well as create content. And finally, we have ensured that like at the end of the day, our HR partners are actually using the solution in their day-to-day work. And I will stop sharing my screen.
Great, thank you for those remarks. With another really great example of how the UN is applying this and thinking about all these concepts and ideas in a way that, again, lots of claps and hearts. I feel like colleagues want to hear more of this. I know you have some resources. Maybe you can share them in the chat as well for colleagues if they want to know more. I might have to do that for you. So if you share it with me, I can share it with the chat. Okay, so with that, some more questions for you. I want to get into those. Before we do, we'll turn it over to our colleagues Fiona and Julia from the data and digital communities to share a bit about their experiences and their work and how you can get involved in those contexts as well. Over to you.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. And a huge thank you to Mary for organizing the session and for making the data and digital communities a part of this conversation. So I'm Fiona from the Executive Office of the Secretary General, where I manage the UN Data Community of Practice, a network of about 8,500 or so data practitioners from across the entire UN system who are looking to essentially advance the use of data in their work and to strengthen their data capabilities. This community is a space for connection, capacity building, and knowledge sharing. And really, it helps break down silos that often prevent teams from learning from each other and makes it easier for colleagues to tap into the already existing expertise across the UN family. So for anyone who's just starting to explore data after today's very interesting introductory session, the Data Community of Practice is really a great place to dive deeper. You'll find resources to stay up to date on data projects and initiatives from across the UN family, opportunities to engage with both internal and external data experts through community events and webinars, tools to strengthen your data skills via our curated training library, and examples of real-world use cases and data strategies from other teams, ranging from use cases in data analytics, data visualization, data management, to more strategic use cases on data governance, data privacy, and other entity-wide data strategies that are out there. And I think especially as it pertains to behavioral science and what we've heard here today from other panelists, the interaction between the user and data tools and data interfaces is critical. And as Professor Korhonen mentioned, AI systems often miss the human context. And this is where BeSci, I think, can make data tools much more impactful. When looking at data visualization, for example, it really helps take the user journey into account when building out an interface and puts humans at the center of the tool when developing. So there's a lot to unpack here, and it's always part of our conversation in the data community and in community events. So please do join if this intersection is something that you're interested in and would like to explore further. Next slide. We also launched a subgroup over a year ago, which is focused on generative AI specifically. So this is the UN Generative AI Practice Group, which brings together colleagues interested in exploring and integrating the responsible use of Gen AI technology and tools specifically into their work. Next slide. And for those of you who are in New York, although we will have the opportunity for colleagues to join some aspects of this day virtually, we're teaming up with OICT to host Hands-on AI Day, a full day dedicated to essentially demystifying AI, exploring how it can be used in our work, and learning from existing applications across the UN system. Would encourage you all to join this event. I will drop the links in the chat for subscription forms to the data community, the generative AI practice group, and also the sign-up form for the Hands-on AI Day. So please do join if you're interested in continuing the conversation. Thank you so much. And with that, I will pass it over to Julia.
Thank you so much, Fiona, and thank you to Mary and the team for having us. I'm Julia. I support the digital community from the UNDP's Chief Digital Office. The community is also supported by ITU and the UN Innovation Network. And yeah, like the data community, we are all about knowledge sharing and enabling connections. We know that colleagues are really keen to share their experiences and learn from each other. In our community, digital practitioners, they care a lot about how to design products that are inclusive and relevant to users' experience, as Fiona just said, and as was presented in the course of the session. This, of course, relates to any digital product, but to AI solutions specifically. So what we try and do is create a space to explore digital programming across the UN, connect fellow practitioners. Everyone is welcome to join us, regardless of their digital background or experience, because we want to enable everyone to be at the forefront of the UN's digital transformation and support this mindset shift towards digital in UN culture. And part of that is inspiring colleagues with use cases like the one that was presented by Zimbabwe and UNICC. Examples like that just kind of help colleagues understand how they can embed digital into the solutions that are part of their mandates. So very exciting. There's many different offers across the data and the digital community, plenty of resources to check out in the UN Innovation Library as well, on digital, like inclusive design, which obviously relates to BeSci. Human-centered design is something that comes up often, and we offer expos in which colleagues can share their AI solutions and use cases, among others, of course. But yeah, feel free to check that out. Links are in the chat. So yeah, with that, just quickly sharing our contacts here, and the signups are in the chat. It'd be great to have you there. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Fiona and Julia. It'd be great if you can put those links to join in the chat. If you don't have privileges, we'll give you privileges to share with colleagues shortly. Okay, so now on to the questions. There are lots of questions coming through. So if everyone can turn their cameras on, we have a few maybe for each of our panelists, then we'll come back to a panel discussion. So I invite you to comment on anything you've heard throughout today. But maybe just going first to Professor Korhonen, this is now a little bit about the UN, where we are with things, the communities. Turn over you some remarks, but maybe just to also flag a few of the questions here about thinking about an example maybe from your work that has applied behavioral science and human and AI, maybe something outside the UN from where things have worked well, but also this maybe perhaps what's alluding to maybe a tension behind being quote unquote rational and then also being real. How do we think about the different? Is our end goal to make it rational or to engage with people in behavioral science, and where do we kind of try to find that right space? So turn over to you for overarching remarks, and if you have any examples from your work and bigger pieces, that would be great. Sorry, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I can maybe start from the rationality question, because I can see many questions in that space. I think we should get away from this idea that AI will replace humans. We should think of it, AI should be adapted to serve humans. So we shouldn't have like ChatGPT running our lives or robots running the world at all. We should remain in control. So it's actually up to us to define what AI we want. And so what do we want? Do we want it to try to sort of correct the norms what humans follow, or do we want it to be as bad as humans in a sense? So it's up to us, and it's actually social scientists should play a big role in this, because AI scientists won't be able to solve that problem on their own. We just don't have the training typically to do that. So that's where the collaborations become really important. So what do people want? What kind of AI people want, and how do we want that AI to serve people? So I don't have a ready answer to this. If you leave it to computer scientists completely, they might just invent something that humans don't want, or that isn't even safe. So that's why we need these interdisciplinary collaborations. But my working assumption is not that AI should be in a particular way in the future, that we should have agents, for example, taking decisions based on some set of criteria that computer scientists have invented. Rather that we should work together to define the norms that and the values and the ethical standards for AI. And those ethical standards, there were some other questions about how do you make this work for the global south? I believe that we need to collaborate with the global south to make sure that whatever AI we develop, that is aligned with the ethics in that region. There's no one size fits all in any of this. And of course, we have the global AI regulation coming, but you can already see that it's very different from the US to what we have in Europe, to what we have, somewhere in Asia. So there needs to be that kind of adaptation to the region, adaptation to the sector. For example, how accurate does an AI need to be when it's applied to health, versus how accurate does AI need to be when you are interacting with the ChatGPT? It's not the end of the world if ChatGPT doesn't perform very well, but in health, you really, really need to perform well. So it's sector specific as well. Anyway, so then to the other question of how I have used, the longest time I've done it, for example, when we develop tools that can help cancer researchers to find new discoveries, we made sure that we had a social scientist interviewing the scientists in terms of how they do their research, because we don't want to develop a tool that doesn't support the way they do research. You wouldn't want to just the tool simply say, here is an interesting hypothesis for you, and they would have no idea where it's coming from. So we did those interviews, and we also used the social scientist in the interviewing. And now we are beginning to work with people that suffer from dementia. It's the same thing. We should not be telling what those people need. We should be having conversations with them and their caretakers, and as well as the clinicians, to find out what they actually need, and then develop the AI that aligns with their needs.
Yeah, there's some great examples to look into. I think there's also a question on health, particularly in primary care, and how we can use AI better, but maybe we can come back to that with our panel too, because health is a big space. But thank you for the example and for laying out a lot of the interesting pieces here about what's real and what's maybe not so real about our thinking about AI and behavioral science today. Okay, so maybe I'll just go to each of the panelists. There are a few questions, trying to get as many as we can. I know, Michelle, you've answered quite a few already in the chat, but just maybe kind of bring together some of your responses. There was one about, to what extent do we know this is better than kind of traditional ways of working, and how you measured that? So we're going to invest this time and effort into exploring AI. How do we know it's worth our time and effort? And particularly in the case that you presented in Morocco, but maybe more generally, why should we be, from a UN perspective, why should we be working in this space versus others maybe?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, especially since so much of our work is in low resource settings. And something as a team that we talk about a lot is the, persistent digital divide, and whether the use of these tools is the right fit for different contexts. So I think one, we're very interested in testing these solutions. So there might be some a priori reasons to think that they can be more effective because they're interactive, engaging, and can be better personalized. But they also require some, upfront resources. There are questions of sustainability if we're trying to pass it on to governments or NGOs who would be implementing these things. So I think it's for us, it's an empirical question as to whether these are the right tools or not, and for which contexts and problems they are the right tools. So one of our goals as a team is to test these things, to ask these questions and compare them against other maybe more traditional solutions that might require mobilizing people in a community and also require heavy resources in a different way. So for us, I think there's reasons to believe they can be effective. There's some evidence in different settings, maybe than the ones that we work, that suggest they can be helpful for things like addressing, for example, mental health or other solutions. So we're interested in exploring it if it's a right fit in this context. But for us, it's a question, not we don't have the answer yet. And then I think sorry, was there another piece of your question?
I mean, there were many questions for you. You've answered a lot of them already. I thought if there's anything else you wanted to pull from those, you can. But I think there's something about the methods you had used to evaluate. But I think you've already kind of answered quite a bit around that.
Yeah, I think for us, as I highlighted in that early slide of kind of what our process is, we do try and start from the diagnostics without assumptions about what the right solution would be. If it seems like something like coaching or something that could be elevated through AI could be a good solution, then we'll, I think, design it and test it in that setting. But for us, we try and be open-minded about what is fit for purpose in different contexts.
Great, thanks for that. So we're looking forward to seeing your case studies when they're out and finished, and we can definitely share them with the group. So lots more to unpack here. I did put in the chat the embed website, so you can check out what's currently available there if you would like to hear more. Okay, so now on to a few questions for Shambhavi. So there's one about prompting. I think you just answered it, but maybe just to kind of bring it to the audience here. Prompting, is that really kind of is that what this is about primarily? So you answered that one. And there's also one about, from your experience, you're coming in from this tech space, but what's been like a good practice learning you'd like to share from your experience, kind of working with more in this AI and chatbot area? So what are some most surprising learnings you've had in this space, kind of coming from the UN side, entering this really kind of more intense AI area? What are some interesting insights you have from that perspective? And then also, is prompting really the way things can go? So over to you for your thoughts on those comments.
Yeah, definitely. And I can start with prompting. So yes, that's the first thing you should be trying. Obviously, like when you build a chatbot and you upload your documents, you have to ensure that, and I will go into a little bit technical side of things, but like the context window, right? Like when you ask a question, you want to ensure that it's able to get enough relevant sections of the document back. So that is obviously you have to test those out, and we also tested it out. We tested like getting 10 documents, and by documents I mean like sections of the documents back, or versus 15 versus 5, because all of that will modify the answers. And once we come up with a decent relevant size of what our context should be, that's when you start with a lot of prompt engineering. And I'm going to say like there are other ways where you can do meta learning, transfer learning, fine tuning, and these exist in large language models as well. But there is no guarantee they will work. They're computationally expensive. And that is something we should move towards only if we are not able to solve the problem at all. And what is the most important learning? I think reasonable expectations, right? Like I feel like the way LMs have been sold is like, oh my God, they are perfect and they're going to replace everybody. And that's not going to happen. They are just a tool in your toolkit that help you resolve problems. It's just, if you take 20 minutes to respond to an email, it will now help you answer it in 5 minutes perhaps. But at the end of the day, you still have to look at the response. So I think that was the biggest learning and challenge that we faced. Like when I say 70% correctness level, it sounds so bad, but you have to realize like when we talk about 70, 80, 90%, firstly, it means that it's still not going to lie, but it's not going to give you everything what a human with all their rationalities and irrationalities would answer. It would just give you most of the aspects of your response. And at the end of the day, humans have to study the response and give answer. Maybe 20 years later, we'll have artificial intelligence. We don't know, but it's not going to happen in the recent future.
Great, thank you for that. There's lots of insights there for colleagues to draw from. Okay, so maybe now a question to Fiona and Julia. I'm going to pull on this one. So to what extent do you think this approach is used across the UN? We've talked about AI, and from the behavioral science perspective, it's still as you can see, it's still pretty new from our world. To what extent is the UN using this? To what extent should the UN be using this more? I don't know, maybe some general thoughts there on how far data and digital has really permeated, and anything else you might want to add, given what you've heard from the speakers today.
Just to clarify, by this, you mean the application of BeSci?
Oh, I mean AI and I mean the application of AI and digital, but then perhaps the intersection with
Okay.
BeSci, but just more generally. I think the question
More
was more
generally.
about AI and data in general. To what extent is
Right.
the UN using this? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I saw that question in the chat. So when it comes to generative AI specifically right now, what we're seeing emerge are mostly chatbots and the synthesis of vast amounts of information and data and being able to sort of interact with it. That's kind of the stage that a lot of colleagues across the UN family are at, and also the application of Gen AI in, daily tasks, so to speak. But with AI more broadly, we do see kind of use cases where AI is being used to generate insights and monitor large data sets, for example. It's really a powerful tool in that sense, whether or not it's tied to a chatbot or some sort of direct user interface. And we do have a lot of these projects kind of hosted in the library. So that's essentially kind of what we're seeing emerge. And I think when you look at the kind of the strategic aspect of this, colleagues do correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that WFP is the only UN entity right now that has an AI strategy specifically, and they just launched it about a month ago. So if you're interested in exploring kind of how AI is emerging from that strategic perspective, that higher level perspective, encourage you all to look into that AI strategy as reference. And then maybe the last kind of pattern we're seeing is thinking around data ethics and biases in LLMs and in the data sets that feed LLMs. And there is quite a bit of thinking around that as well in the community and across the UN family. And we do also have a couple of webinars that explore that thinking in the community. Maybe I'll pass it over back to Mary if that answered the question, and then Julia can chime in.
Yeah, that's great, Fiona. There's lots there. If there's anything else, maybe again, colleagues always ask for links in the chat. So if you want to maybe share anything to the WFP's initiative, can you share? You're not able to share?
I can't. Yeah, I was just going to flag
Okay.
that.
I'll make you co-host now.
Thanks.
Okay. While I do that, maybe Julia, over to you. Where's the state of digital in the UN?
Yeah, so with AI, with all the work that we try and share in the community, we see more and more AI use cases pop up and solutions that people are working on. So I notice it both in what colleagues are interested in, because it really feels top of mind, just because of, if you're interested in digital, you will probably hear about developments and how fast they're moving. So you can really see how colleagues are trying to think of ways and to use tools to enhance their solutions that they may have already been building, or come up with new solutions. And so as soon as we can put the links in the chat, you can explore some of those that we presented in our expo format. One thing that what I think is also happening in the iSpace or across UN is that entities are thinking about how to upskill their colleagues in AI itself. So I think those developments are definitely happening too, where there's lots of tools that don't necessarily obviously require technical skills, but really can enhance your day-to-day work, which again comes with lots of guidelines and keeps to think in mind, things to keep in mind in terms of privacy and bias. And so I think what will come up more and more across entities is like helping colleagues understand how to navigate tools and use them to their most advantage.
Great, thank you for that, Julia. I think there's also a question, trying to pick as many as we can, about training in this space. So if you would like to learn more, this is exactly where you can join the digital community and the data community to learn more about this space overall. We are doing a behavioral science training in May and June, but we probably will not intersect massively in this area. So I'd encourage you to join those communities. Okay, so we have a few minutes left, and there are too many questions to handle for today. But what if our panelists can stay for a couple more minutes? I might just go back to some of the bigger themes and turn it over to you to comment on whatever in the area. So Starting out with Professor Korhonen's remarks, I think one thing that really resonated and struck was like this importance of partnerships and working across our silos and engaging not only across academic disciplines, but with academia and UN and the private sector, the public sector, and all the different partners. So there's that, but then there's also working with Global South and people on the ground and understanding the context in that. So it feels like it's not just, there's a technical component we've obviously unpacked, but there's also very much this, how do we bring an understanding of the systems and the right partners together. So maybe knowing what we talked about today and colleagues who are starting out, because I think a lot of the colleagues here are kind of new to this space, what might you say about finding the right partners to do this, to get off the ground? I'll leave it there. You can answer that as you'd like. So yeah, I see Michelle nodding. Maybe over to Michelle first. I feel like she might have something already in mind to share.
No, I think it just the idea of partnerships has resonated a lot, and something that I think our team and the institution more broadly is also trying to focus more on or do a better job of reaching out to academics, NGOs, think tanks who are local to the countries where we're working. And part of this initiative has been supported by a new institute at the World Bank called the Institute for Economic Development, that's aiming to be kind of a central area where we can kind of connect these disparate partners and really exchange knowledge, not unidirectional from us, producing reports that are consumed, but really, promote more of an exchange. So I think it's great to hear others' experiences with this, and even from the academics, how we could do a better job of sharing our work with them and learning from them too.
Great, thanks for that. Anything else, Shambhavi? You mentioned you'd worked with, I think, was it Microsoft for your work as well? How was that experience? Or any other, you had lots of partners in your work as well. Anything you want to share?
Yeah, I think I would say and I just don't want to say Microsoft, every single partners, we work with AWS, Microsoft, Google, and so on, Snowflake, and so on. But in all of them, I would suggest when you're building out a solution, you should always include scale into the whole aspect, because once you do a POC, then the scaling aspect. And that's where I think it's super helpful to partner with whoever you're working with at that point, whichever cloud, to ensure that the solution that you're implementing is scalable and secure, because I think that's the biggest concern of today, security, and cybersecurity, in my opinion, is the thing everybody should just focus on.
That's a very good point. We didn't touch upon that today, and that's a really, really important point about doing this stuff. It's great to have our shiny case studies, but there's a lot to consider behind the scenes there. So maybe we'll turn it over to Fiona and Julia, then we'll give the last word to Professor Korhonen. But do you have any thoughts on partnerships, working with behavioral scientists maybe in the future? Anything, Julia, Fiona, you would like to share? If not, that's fine too, but just thought I'd give you a chance.
Thanks for giving me the chance. No, just that there are already a ton of resources out there on existing partnerships and partnership strategies, and I'll link those in the chat as well. So just encourage you all to kind of leverage existing expertise and resources that are already out there and connect with other colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe just to say that we see from this turnout today that clearly there's an interest to connect AI, digital, behavioral science, all of that together. So I'm sure we'll have more offers in the groups going forward.
Great, thanks for that, both of you. Now, finally, over to Professor Korhonen. We talked about partnerships at the start. We can maybe conclude with some remarks on that. Now that you've heard kind of how we've worked, what are your thoughts on how we can maybe better engage with academia, or just more generally?
So yeah, it's been really fascinating listening to this conversation, and I think you're already thinking in terms of partnerships, so that's great. I think what I would encourage maybe is when you encounter situations like you are having a chatbot, and chatbots are everywhere now, and you discover bias there that it isn't quite fit for the purpose, then reach out to academia, because these people love to take chatbots, break them apart, and address the biases and try to sort of produce better tools using the latest technologies, and they love to collaborate as well. So don't just think that because ChatGPT is out there that's what you need to use. There are techniques that can be used to innovate better technologies that can then, and once those get used and published, then the big tech might be inspired to do something better as well. So that's just to encourage to that kind of reaching out to academics as well. but yeah, all of this, it's a whole ecosystem, and I think we need to collaborate across it. And also it will be very much dependent on the context where we are developing these tools and the task that we develop them for.
Right. Okay. With that, I don't think we can conclude on a better note than that, of just how we can work better together to bring this agenda forward. It feels like we're at the start of something. Well, it is very clear we're at the start of something very exciting and new and novel. And where we take it is up to kind of how we form these partnerships when we go together. So with that, thank you very much to our panel and to everyone joining us today. Clearly a lot of interest in this topic and a lot more to come, I think, in the future. So we have lots of links in the chat there. Maybe just give a couple minutes to kind of get anything else that you might want. I think Michelle just shared something a few minutes ago. So with that, thank you very much for joining us today, and looking forward to seeing you over the next few days. We have a session in about an hour on behavioral science and data, so hopefully can see you there. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye for now.